genuine conversations with unique minds on the threats, the complexity, and the geopolitics shaping our world. This is the Entropy Podcast with Francis Gorman.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Entropy Podcast. I'm your host, Francis Gorman. Before we dive in, if today's conversation challenges you, sparks a new idea, or sharpens how you think about the world, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who enjoys staying curious. Today I'm joined by Snehal Antani, the CEO and co-founder of Horizon3.ai, a cybersecurity company that has pioneered the use of AI to autonomously conduct penetration testing. Prior to Horizon 3, Snehal served as the first Chief Technology Officer for the Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, as a member of the Commander's executive team, where he led data analytics, cloud and edge computing, and cybersecurity initiatives. Prior to serving with the US Special Operations, Snehal was CTO and SVP at Splunk and has held multiple CIO roles at GE Capital and started his career as a software engineer at IBM. Snehal, it's great to have you here with me today.
Amazing to be here. I appreciate meeting up with you again.
No, it's great to have you. And look, you've been super busy. I think I said to you before we started recording. Every time I turn on LinkedIn, you seem to be in front of me off the back of the now $2 billion valuation of Horizon 3. So very well done there, and a huge congratulations. It's a massive milestone.
No, it's amazing. It's a great team, great set of partners, great customers. If you were at Black Cat, you'd have seen Horizon 3 as a 30-story high sign at the Hilton World Resorts and everywhere else. So it's nice to invest in the brand after you've cultivated a base of champions and partners, because you want to create this reaction of, oh, I've heard of those guys, they're awesome, versus who are these guys, right? And so it's been 6 years in the making.
Yeah, I saw the picture, so I can only imagine what it looked like if you were standing in front of it. It looked pretty big. Snehal, I have to ask, because I talk to a lot of people who have startups, and when you start out in this voyage, you have an unknown path. Do you need to be slightly delusional to get to where you are? Like, do you need a little bit of kind of, I know where I'm going, I know I'm going to end up in this place, even if the world doesn't agree with me or doesn't exactly align with my perception? Is there a level there that you need to go to that's, below the surface that most people don't talk about?
Yeah, I think there definitely is. So I would break kind of the traits of a founder into a couple of things. Number one, you have to be a learn-it-all. What I mean by that is, as a founder, like early on, as a founder CEO, not only was I the product manager and the engineering leader, and we had an amazing team, right? Co-founder and the early folks were great at building and shipping code, but you needed to align the code they were writing towards the value you want to deliver. Then you had to be the CFO. You had to understand the financial plans. You don't run out of money. You had to be the marketing leader and figure out how to tell that story to the market, the sales leader, so on and so forth. You need to pull the processes in place. And most people don't have all those experiences. And that's okay. What you need to have, though, is this learn it all characteristic that allows you to dig in very deeply. I think it was much harder to be a learn it all and dig in deeply 5 years ago. But now with LLMs and Anthropic and Grok and whatever, you can dig into a topic pretty quickly and get good enough to be dangerous. So I think you have to be a learn it all. You have to have grit. It is not easy. You're going to have all sorts of obstacles thrown at you. My bank went out of business in the middle of funding payroll, and I had to loan the company money myself to make sure that my people got paid. That's just grit at that point. And then conviction. The funny thing about venture capitalists is people assume they walk on water, some kind of legendary business leaders. Honestly, most of them are skinny jeans wearing, latte sipping, recent MBAs that think they're God's gift to society with no operational experience. And we have to understand is there's a lot of reasons why a VC is going to say no. Don't take it personally. And it's you want a buckshot. You want to take as many chances as you can. And you're going to find alignment with hopefully more than one, and you're going to find the right investor for you. So I think between learn it all, grit, and conviction, if you don't have those, you're going to struggle as a founder. And that's in addition to all the other ways a company could fail.
It's funny when I heard you talking about there. I was reading the article on the Silicon Valley Bank and you having to do a personal payday to keep everything ticking over. Which is a great safety net to have in one way, but obviously a huge risk in another because you're dipping into your own pockets now. You're putting more risk in. You're putting more chips on the table, and if things go sideways, they go really sideways at that point. But you said something there about kind of being a learn it all, and it kind of reminded me of, I'm not sure if you ever read The Hard Thing About Hard Things. It's one of my favorite books. But I was reading your posts on LinkedIn about pirates having to join the navy. You're kind of your early crew. And what you said there now, and all of those things kind of resonate to what Ben talks about in that book. Can you talk to me a little bit about the starting out with the pirates and then having to navigate your way to join the navy, and that shift in culture as a small company becomes something greater, something with more presence, something with more responsibility?
Yeah, it's interesting. So sales is probably the most obvious transition of pirates to a navy. So when you first start a company and you get the initial product out the door, the big question you're asking is, can I even sell this thing? Like, are people willing to pay for it? And you don't really know what the price is going to be, or price discount schedules, or even sales cycle or procurement process. Kind of, but not so much because you're launching this product for the first time, especially in a completely new category. And so you need pirates or sales reps that don't want process. They don't want to be told how to do things. They just are going to sit there and figure it out. So when you have three sales reps that are three different pirates, you're going to have kind of three different ways that they've sold. And then you want to look at as best practice or pattern match across them. And as you do enough of those, you're going to start to find a repeatable sales motion. And then you want to extract out the repeatable sales motion that worked and then start to build around it. And then you hire that fourth or that fifth or that sixth pirate in your sales team, and you're giving them a playbook. Now, it's not a strict playbook, but it's like, hey, here's what's worked already. Help us make it better. At some point, though, you reach a critical mass of sales reps where you have a really good playbook. You understand kind of the process of selling the product, how to be disciplined at discounting and so on. And now you've got to build this into process because you need to go from 10 sales reps to 100 sales reps. And when you do so, you can't have 100 pirates. It's going to be chaotic. Now you need systems and processes, discount schedules, how you qualify an opportunity. And actually, it becomes much more of a spreadsheet exercise in the later stages of a company than a true pirate creativity exercise. What I mean by that is, you now know, all right, if I can open 100 deals, I know 70 of them are going to get that initial conversation. I know half of them, or 35, are going to do a proof of value. And I know half of them, say 15, are going to actually buy the product. And as you see enough of that, you now know how many deals you need to open, how much revenue you're going to get if you open those deals, because it's all conversion math. And so that's when you start to think about building a navy. You've got systems, processes, structure, formulas, and pirates hate working in that environment. So you've got this class of sales rep that love that seed A, B stage. You've got the next set of leaders that love going from like A, B, C. And then you've got the final set of leaders that know how to go from C round through IPO and beyond because they can build systems and machines.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I suppose to see that unfold in front of you and kind of take those learnings back and talk about them means it was a real revelation as it kind of appeared. You see the material change that happens there, and I kind of want to pick up on something you've described your time at JSOC as a kind of a PhD in leadership. Did that prepare you for some of the kind of the choppy waves that were ahead?
It did, but in a completely different way. So my time in special operations, one, just for clarity, right? My military background is watching Jack Ryan and Tropic Thunder. Like, I'm not a shooter. I didn't come from a military family. And for me to leave industry and join JSOC was a huge risk for them, to be honest, because they brought in somebody that had no lineage or DNA. And it's always very dicey because you see this movie play out into catastrophic failure where somebody that watched a bunch of movies and read a bunch of books walk into the special operations committee and think they know what they're doing. And my first day on the job, one of the assistant commanding generals pulled me to the side. This guy is just an amazing leader, legendary a leader in the military and special operations community. He said, listen, what you did yesterday won't keep you here tomorrow. You earned the right to be on this team every single day. And don't think because you read read books and movies that you know anything about us. Keep your mouth shut, listen, and learn. And it was amazing because it's, at that point coming into JSOC, I was the youngest at whatever. I was a super young executive at GE. I was a young corporate officer of a publicly traded company. I was arrogant. I had swagger. I was cocky. And I'll tell you, man, I grew more personally being in JSOC, surrounded by the greatest leaders the world will never know about. And what I realized is my own personal growth, which is it's not about the vanity or the accolades or the accomplishments, man. It's about solving a problem that actually matters. It's about doing something of consequence. And I think if you looked at me at leaving JSOC and going into it, and kind of the delta between the two me's, completely different from a personality, attitude, values, what drove me, what motivated me. And I needed that kick, to be honest with you. So I think I got more from them than they got from me. And I'm extremely fortunate to have had that position.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think to get that grounding, it sets you up for great things ahead. So even hearing you talking about it now, I can tell you took a huge amount away from those days. Snehal, can I ask you something? I read yesterday or the day before that the White House have now signed off that private companies can do offensive security against enemies of America or people who target America. That sounds like something you'd be all over. Is that a reality now, or did I read fake news? Is that
so? It's certainly something that the administration is pushing for. I've had the privilege of meeting and learning and building relationships with key cyber leaders at the White House, at Homeland, at Department of War, and elsewhere. And the people in the seat are quite savvy. They know what they're doing. They're cyber experts. They're not empty suited politicos. Like, they are deep kind of experts in this area. And so the idea is, how do you impose costs in different ways? Thus far, the approach of burning down attacker infrastructure, which is really what the FBI and law enforcement's been doing, it's whack-a-mole, because the next day they spin up more infrastructure. And so you're running in this hamster wheel and not making any real progress. So the fundamental question is, what are the ways to impose costs? Now, you can impose costs through sanctions. You can impose costs through law enforcement. You can impose costs by having a bigger stick and hitting back with that bigger stick. So I think that the question that the administration and I think policymakers have asked for a while is, what are the full range of options to impose costs? And let's try different things to see what we can do, because the hamster wheel hasn't really changed enemy behavior. There are still massive cyber attacks. There are still attacks against hospitals causing loss of lives. There's attacks against critical business infrastructure causing economic harm. You just saw what happened at Jaguar Land Rover in the UK, and so on and so forth. So I think that this is just one of a variety of concepts that are being explored to impose cost against the adversary.
No, it's very interesting. That clarifies it for me. The post I read, it kind of sounded like it was a done deal, but it sounds like there's a bit of work left to do to get it across the table. But it's a fascinating area because, and I'll let you talk to this. But is the attacker getting smarter, or is the attacker getting more enabled by things like AI and large language models and higher levels of compute?
If you elevate the question to, what does cyber warfare look like in the current era? I think there's a few drastic changes in characteristics. Number one is there's no longer a distinction between military and civilian targets. So if you look at the breakout of the Iranian war, you had AWS data centers in Bahrain being attacked and destroyed by rocket attack. That's just one example. If you look at, there was a story that the Japanese had provided support to Ukraine, and allegedly the Russians got angry and ransomware a small company in Tokyo. And that company in Tokyo provided all the cup holders to Toyota. And due to just-in-time logistics and lean manufacturing, Toyota had to shut down 28 production lines, and it cost them almost $400 million of economic harm over cup holders. The flex by the Russians was not that they could ransomware a small company. It's that they knew where to apply the least amount of effort to cause the maximum amount of economic harm, all below the threshold for war. Because we're not going to spin up the 82nd Airborne and go to war over cup holders, right? So I think that, number one, there's no longer a distinction between military and civilian targets. I think number two is that AI gives the adversary unlimited bullets. So if you think about playing video games growing up, if you played a game that had limited ammunition, you were very selective of who you shot. If you punch in that cheat code, it was a up, down, left, right, BA start. If you ever played the old Konami games, you punch in that cheat code and you have unlimited ammo. What'd you do? Full auto, smoke everything, no hesitation, no nothing. The same thing happens in cyber warfare. If you have unlimited cyber bullets, you don't have to only go after the big dogs. You can go after that 30-person equipment manufacturing company outside of Detroit and take out Ford, right? If you wanted to, or at least the manufacturing lines of Ford. And so when you've got unlimited cyber bullets, you no longer have to worry about military versus civilian targets. Suddenly it's the long tail of industry that's at risk. And that's the long tail that can't fend for themselves. Water treatment facilities, manufacturing companies, regional banks, regional oil refineries, people that can barely tread water, barely fend for themselves. So I think what we're in now is this era of cyber-enabled economic warfare that where cyber is being used to achieve national objectives, political, economic, whatever. And the entire industry is not prepared for that level of attacker.
So what you're saying is the question needs to be, can somebody hurt us? Not, is there a vulnerability in the system? Which is, what we spend a lot of time as an industry looking at is vulnerabilities, not exploitability. And I think that's where Node Zero or, these capabilities come to the fore and start to kind of push on that wall and see, is there a leak or is there a crack or, can something get through? Where do you think we're going to end up, Snehal, as we progress down the road? Because compute seems to be increasing by 10x at the moment or higher. We've seen Grok's model has jumped on the same power as the GPT models and as the Claude models in the last week or two. Like, it seems the Chinese models are coming in and smashing the market at a lower cost. Like, when compute becomes open source and available and this intelligence is consumable, is this going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better?
Yes and no. So if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would have said it's going to be extremely bad across the board. But we did some really interesting research around the gullibility of models. And the thesis or the hypothesis that I had at the time when I directed the research team to do this was these models are all training on extremely shallow cyber data, right? Last I checked, JP Morgan didn't publish their network configurations online anywhere for Anthropic to scoop up and train off of. All the most valuable cyber data is behind the firewall. It's not accessible to the frontier labs. So when you have an extreme shortage of training data, you end up training on things that are very shallow, vulnerability reports, hack the box ranges, and so on and so forth. So the hypothesis was, given the shallowness of the training data, how gullible are these models? How easy it is it to trick them with deception and honeypots and honey tokens? And it turns out it's incredibly easy because these models they're not sentient. They're not like thinking on their own. They're remembering what they've seen in their data sets. So if you stand up a honeypot that looks like Juice Shop, which is the OWASP, a vulnerable web app, these models can't help themselves but chase and pursue that honeypot because that's what they've seen. That's what they remember. Now, the models will get a little bit better at that, but they're still pretty awful in the sense that a human hacker will click on a fake password.txt file 37% of the time. 37%. 464748 from the Anthropic family will click on that same honeypot or honey token 92% of the time. So almost or more than twice as bad as the human. And Kimi K2 thinking was the best performing at 61 or 62% of the time it would click on it, but it was still almost twice as bad. But that's an arbitrarily laid out password.txt file. If you optimally place these things, a fake AWS credential file in the user home directory, for instance, you can get the latest models to click on it 95% of the time. So suddenly you can hack the hackers. If you understand the inherent training data flaws of these agents, you're able to use deception, and it's suddenly the cheapest, fastest, most effective way at catching agentic attackers. So 6 months ago, I would have said we were doomed. Now, based on the outcome of this research, I actually feel it's going to be a really big nothing burger for those that optimally place honey tokens, and catch the agents living off the land, while also building the muscle memory for how to react to those alerts.
So off the back of that, I'm going to have to ask you then, how bought in are you to the whole my AI escaped its secure sandbox and created some illegal crimes against another company?
Yeah, it's garbage, man. Like I'm appreciative of the demand that these companies are creating for my product. Like it's a huge tailwind. But man, it is such fear mongering and hype. And I'm not anti Frontier Labs. They're doing amazing things. I'm anti fear mongering because I'll tell you what, our prototype broke out in 2019 and started interrogating all of the other businesses on the ISP of my co-founder's network, right? Breaking out is something that is pretty easy to do if you don't have the right guardrails in place. So what that tells me is they don't have guardrails. They didn't invest in the guardrails to prevent them from committing federal crimes. We spent 6 years building those guardrails so we don't commit a crime and we don't accidentally attack somebody. It's extremely hard to build those guardrails, but it's required. And so I think that the fear mongering, the positive of the fear mongering is we're having board level discussions of cybersecurity and post mythos and so on. The reality of the fear mongering is every practitioner reads the headline and rolls their eyes.
I'm so happy you said that, because the minute I read it, I think I posted something to the offense of, Chinese model is cheap. My model broke out and broke into your company, so it's far better, which I think there's a whole legality piece there that needs to be looked at some point. If, the environment is so brittle that it can just go out and attack other companies downstream. In talking about this, Snehal, you've obviously got a highly capable technology on your hands, and you've rolled it out in some major companies across the world now. Your client list is growing by the day. When you let Node Zero loose on a network, was there any cases where you were horrified with the results, or the company at hand, went, "Oh my God, is it really that bad?" Did it unearth anything that was terrifying, essentially?
I'll tell you, I was pretty decent at cybersecurity going into Horizon 3. I knew enough to be dangerous. I have learned so much about cyber watching Node Zero hack organizations. I've learned so much about defensive controls, the effectiveness of those controls, policies, all these other ways that Node Zeros compromise you. What I have are some pretty crazy stories, to be honest with you. So the first crazy story I'll tell you is this customer had an incredibly thorough password policy, 14 character, alphanumeric, blah, 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 blah. 70% of their passwords across their company were identical, not similar, identical, the exact same password. And the best reaction is when they're like, no, this is a false positive. This isn't true. I'm like, no, man, like this thing doesn't lie. Here's the command we ran. Here's what it did. Copy and paste the command yourself if you want. So they look at it, and it turned out that they had this great password policy, but nobody ever turned on force new password upon first login. So we had all these employees join the company, and they all thought the password they were given was the password they were assigned. Nobody ever forced them to change the password. And it was a pretty complicated password. So they memorized this thing. And so this is an example of you do the right things on paper. You miss one checkbox, which is force new password on login, and the entire house of cards falls apart. So I've got dozens of stories like that just from this year. But I mean, what would you do if your team came back to you and said, "Hey, boss, by the way, we did all these things, but it turned out we never forced people to change their password, and now everyone has the exact same password."
Beat them with a stick and then go cry in a corner for a little while, I think was probably
So here's another crazy story. I think it was Zero Logon. So this hospital had done everything right. They applied the patches for Zero Logon, which is a CVS 10 like critical CVE and immediate one-click the domain admin type problem. So they apply the patch. They run us, and we exploit zero logon and get full domain admin control of the network. And the initial reaction is always the same. Nope, not possible, because they're so tuned to things being a false positive in this world. We go off and say, like, there's no concept of a false positive in the way that we execute a pen test. We either successfully executed the attack path or we didn't. It's very clear, one or the other. So we show them the proof of zero logon. And they go to the domain controller, they look at one of their vuln scanning reports, and the scanning report says, no, it's patched. But it clearly isn't, it's exploitable. It turns out the zero logon patch had 2 steps. Step 1 was modify the registry to say patch applied. Step 2, update the binary. Cylance blocked the binary from being updated. So the registry was changed, the binary was never changed. And for 18 months, this poor customer had reported to their regulators and auditors they were not susceptible to zero logon. And it took us to prove that was the case. So it kind of goes back to the mantra of the company, which is trust but verify, with the trust but crossed out. Because don't tell me we're secure, show me. And then show me again tomorrow, and then show me again next week. Because the environment's always changing and the adversary always has a vote. That's a quote I heard from my JSOC commander every day. I talked to him about cyber, because that was his mentality. It was an amazing mentality to have.
I think we talked about this a while back when we were in person in Dublin, and you told me a use case where you would set Node Zero alive and set a timer and watch how long it takes the SOC to respond, and then do kind of a top-down, bottom-up analysis to go, why did it take 4 hours for the first guy to do anything? Why did it take a week for the next guy? And then run it again. And that's it. That's it. Be ready. Be prepared. And I've actually played that conversation in my mind, I would say 100 times since you said it, because it makes so much sense. That battle readiness, that wartime ready. Can you is that something that working with government agencies and with military kind of embedded into your mindset, that it's no good trusting that you're ready. You have to really prove and validate that you're ready.
Yeah, it's I've seen that in 2 different ways at an elite level. The first was my time at IBM. I worked closely with the mainframe and mainframe customers. And mainframe customers, it was absolutely expected that they would shut down their data centers every quarter and prove HADR. They'd prove failover, they'd prove recovery, and they'd build the processes and the muscle memory for how to recover these systems. And then, the mainframe doesn't crash, but you still wanted to prove what happens if an LPAR goes down, what happens if a region goes down, will parallel sysplex kick off, and so on and so forth. Will it actually work? You want to go off and build that muscle memory around disaster recovery. And I think that companies that are really good at HADR testing are also, as a result, very good at cybersecurity incident response, because it's in their DNA to test that. So I saw that on the commercial side. On the military analogy was interesting. So I was at an exercise. I was invited to an exercise by one of the special mission units. I got to watch how they operated. And they said, listen, we don't practice with dummy rounds here. We train with live rounds. And I was, it wasn't something I was expecting. It's an exercise. Wouldn't it be dummy rounds so people don't get hurt? And they go, listen, if we use dummy rounds, everyone's going to act like a Medal of Honor recipient. If you use live rounds and the risk of getting hurt, then you know what you're going to do in the heat of the moment. You've built that muscle memory. You've built that fear. You've built that anxiety. And you've built the ability to cope with it and do what you've got to do to get the mission done. And so he goes, we always train like we fight, because you don't want to learn how to deal with a crisis in the middle of crisis. You want to learn how to deal with it ahead of time. So when things go wrong, it's just muscle memory. So both of those experiences kind of codified this idea that you have to train like you fight in cyber. If you get an alert that's a legit incident at 3:00 in the morning, Christmas Eve, what are you going to do? Who has the authority to shut down the entire network to prevent ransomware from destroying all your data? Do you? Does your boss? Does the board? What is the decision-making authority? So you don't want to just train like you fight in business hours on a weekday. You want to hit that alert button when key people are on holiday, when it's the weekend, it's the nights, it's so on and so forth. You want to build that muscle memory ahead of time so you know what to do when things go wrong.
I suspect if you told that story in a boardroom, everyone would get incredibly uncomfortable all of a sudden, But the live ammo does bring it to life on the Christmas Eve or the bank holiday weekend, because that's anyone who works in cyber knows that's when shit really goes wrong. It's the middle of the night and it's the bank holiday when everyone's off. It's those hours you don't expect it. So are you battle ready? I love that, Snehal. That's an amazing analogy, and it really does kind of just bring it to life. We're talking about technology and we're talking about warfare. When you look at what's going on in the Ukraine at the moment with the absolute explosive adoption of drone technology and AI and mesh AI technologies on the battlefield, does it take your mind to what the future of warfare is going to look like?
It absolutely does. I had the privilege of being in a role where I had to deeply think about the future operating environment during my time in special operations. In fact, one of the several lines of effort I had was the research and development line. And we always talk about the future operating environment and then work backwards. So future operating environment is in some window of time, whether it's in 3 years or 5 years. What are the characteristics of what our teams are going to have to go into, and what do we do to better prepare them? Give them options, give them tools, whatever else we're going to go do. If you look at the time, what we really thought about was human machine teaming. How do we, in what we call the tactical bubble, was if you have an objective, a house you're raiding or whatever, you've got this 300-foot bubble, virtual bubble or dome around that target. Inside that 300-foot dome is incredibly chaotic. You've got Little Bird helicopters, Black Hawk helicopters, assault forces, K9s, all converging on this really tight space with enemies that have a vote in everything that's going on, because they are also going to be adapting. And if you're going to start to arbitrarily throw quadcopters in there, in this highly dynamic space, you run the risk of a quadcopter hitting a friendly helicopter and causing loss of life. So suddenly, human-machine teaming, machine-to-machine deconfliction, like these become really hard engineering problems to go off and solve. And in addition, you're solving these problems in an austere environment. It's dusty, it's cold, it's wet, it's jammed with GPS signal jamming and Wi-Fi jamming. It's not a simple, clean environment. And so when you think about the future of warfare, the hardest problem to go solve is human-machine teaming in this 300-foot bubble. But then you extrapolate that out, and the problems are still hard, but they change quite a bit. So in Ukraine, it was drone warfare in denied environments where you've got GPS jamming, RF signal jamming, and so on. And now they've basically got fishing line worth of fiber optics cables flying behind these drones. And then, so I think what's interesting about Ukraine is it's become a true battle lab, and the iteration, it's the cat and mouse of one side comes up with a new idea, the other side counters it. The other side comes up with the next idea, the first side counters it. And I think it's more the real innovation out of Ukraine isn't the kit, it's not the gear, but it's the iterative mindset that's been institutionalized across Ukrainian forces.
Yeah, it's super fascinating to watch from a technology perspective. Obviously, the warfare piece is not ideal, but Mikhailov seems to have been kind of a real driver of force when it comes to coming up with new ways to adapt warfare and technology to the battlefield. The one thing I want to talk about slightly is as we move more towards autonomous technologies, and I think we talked before about the Maven system in Iran and that school that got misclassified and blown up, etc. Is that risk of AI replacing human judgment getting to be a bit of a thin line as to where we stand on either side of it? Is it getting a little bit more complicated to go the machine's right or the human needs to stand in, especially when warfare is getting so complex in the technology space?
One thing I'm actually quite worried about, and there's some really respected intelligence officers that grew up in military intelligence that talk about this as well, where if you become too dependent on LLMs or AI output, then it's a problem. In fact, I think what makes a great intelligence officer, once again, my military experience being Tropic Thunder and Jack Ryan, but what I observed during my time in special operations is that intelligence officers are great because they are skeptical. It's that they don't trust what they see. And so because they don't trust what they see, they force people to ask the additional questions and really dig in and dig in and dig in. And then they get a more complete picture, the skeptic's view, the optimist's view. And then from there, they're able to make an assessment. And so I found that this skepticism is super important. But in these junior intelligence officers, how do you protect that skepticism that's valuable while allowing them to use AI as unlimited interns to go off and accelerate understanding? And I don't think people have really cracked that code. I mean, people haven't cracked that code in academia yet. You can navigate, get an A in a course by LLMing your way through it and know nothing about the subject at the end if you wanted to. So I do think that in the role of AI in military and intelligence is super dicey because you want to make sure that people don't believe what the LLM is saying, because the LLM is going to hallucinate. It's easy to manipulate. A savvy adversary is going to corrupt training data or find ways to steer you towards a conclusion that they want you to conclude, and so on. So I think that AI for military intelligence is super questionable. I think autonomy at the edge, however, is where you're going to see the most incredible leaps of innovation. And I think of Tesla as the model. So if you think about Tesla, when my wife's Tesla is about to rear end somebody, it doesn't take a bunch of sensor signals, throw it over the net to the cloud for a decision that says slam on the brakes and swerve. Collision avoidance is done on the car in isolation. And so I think autonomy at the edge is going to be the true area of innovation. And it's a completely different speed of data compression, speed of signals analysis, speed of decision-making that is much tougher to corrupt, I think.
If you're to look out at the next 5 years, Snehal, what worries you most and what excites you most of what we're seeing and where we're going?
I would say within cyber, there's no magic easy button in anything that we do. There is no AI savior that's going to suddenly make your lives better. You've got to master the art of deciding what not to fix. You've got to master the art of knowing that your security tools are actually working. You've got to master the art of training like you fight. The equivalent of that in military is shoot, move, and communicate. One of the first things somebody told me when I joined JSOC was, hey, this isn't an Ethan Hunt type crazy acrobatic thing that we do here. We are experts. This is the Special Mission Unit commander telling me, we are experts at the fundamentals. We've mastered the fundamentals of shoot, move, and communicate. And that's what makes them so special, amongst other things. And so in cyber, it's mastering the fundamentals. There is no easy button. And I think over the next 5 years, the defenders are going to hope for an easy button, and the attackers are going to exploit the fact that there isn't one. I think that's just the reality. And unfortunately, it's going to take tragedy to drive innovation and change. And it's going to take a string of bad events for people to finally wake up and realize there is no easy button coming. You've got to invest in the hard stuff to get it right.
I really like that. And it actually resonates with me quite a bit because I see signal versus noise a lot, especially in detection capabilities, where LLMs are throwing up stuff. You've got junior analysts looking at it going, okay, well, that's that. So that's fine. Next. And it kind of becomes almost like a repetitive sport of yes, okay, rather than stop, validate, question, assume the worst case scenario. So I think we talked about it earlier on where we're spending so much time and energy asking a technology what the right answer would be without fully understanding how that answer was, or how that answer was, brought to the fore. So we're losing muscle memory. We're losing our ability to question things at a deeper level. And I think as a business owner, as a CEO, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, is there certain skills that are going to become really critical in this new age of, I suppose, dilution of the workforce?
Yeah, I think a more generalized version of the question you asked is, what does talent strategy look like in the age of AI? And, I think of talent in three stripes. You've got the early career high potentials, right? You poach them from college, and these kids are running 100 miles an hour, super ambitious, learn it all, crazy smart, and they're going to be of consequence in their career. You've got what I call kind of the mediocre middle. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but it's a job. What they're doing is a job. I saw this at IBM. There's a lot of people that were lifers at IBM when I first graduated college, and they were super happy, 9 to 5, doing their job, and they were doing great things, providing for their families. But they were always going to be in that kind of middle layer. They were not going to be senior engineers. They weren't junior engineers. They were just in the middle. And there's a lot of them. The bulk of the workforce is there. And then you had like the senior engineers, the senior technical staff members, the absolute legends that are deep experts in architecture and code and can build anything and so on. I think AI is going to squeeze out that middle very quickly. And I think that you're going to see the seniors with using AI as unlimited interns, giving them maximal amount of capacity. I think you're going to see the juniors become seniors even faster because they have bots they can spar with to learn a subject even better. And I think that middle is going to be under a ton of pressure. Now, I think we've already seen a portion of this happen. So in the US, I don't know how it was in Ireland, but in the US in 2015, 16, 17, there were a lot of government programs to incentivize learning how to code. So you'd go off and do like a 12-week boot camp and learn how to be a front-end JavaScript developer or whatever else there might be, a Python developer or so on. Those were the first jobs to get eliminated when AI coding came into play, because an AI coding agent could write better code faster, of higher quality, and with minimal rework. Because a lot of these second career like boot camp grads, they didn't have the expertise or the fundamentals. They were just pretty okay front-end developers. So I think it's that middle that's going to be under a ton of pressure. And they either have to acquire tribal knowledge that's going to make them sticky and differentiated, or they're going to be put in a position where they've got to find an adjacent career because agents are just better than they are.
That's a really interesting perspective, because my question always is, when the middle erodes, how does the bottom get to the top? Would you reckon the agents will have got so complex that they'll be able to kind of drag them up a layer? Do you think they'll be their managers for a while, and then there'll be some sort of a transition jump? I struggle to visualize what this looks like, but
it's hard, man. Like, I'll tell you what's not going to be the case. I don't believe in the no humans at all, token maxing, like one person company building something of consequence. I don't think that's a future whatsoever. I think that in general, and I don't know that this has changed that much, those obsessed with mastering their craft are going to come out on top, period. If you are not obsessed at mastering your craft, you are not going to learn how to utilize agents to make you even more effective. And you're going to be an ostrich, and you're going to stick your head in the sand and hope this thing goes away, and you're going to get blindsided. So I think it comes down to, regardless of generational technology. I mean, in the 60s, computers were humans doing the math, right? And think of the level of advanced mathematics required to be computed by hand in NASA. I mean, there are movies on this. And then when computers came out, what happened? It's not that those people were eliminated, but those obsessed with mastering their craft adapted and became COBOL programmers or Fortran programmers, and went off and did amazing things. So I think that it's easy to be afraid with all the fear mongering of AI and jobs and so on. But the honest question you ask yourself is, if you are not obsessed with mastering your craft, why are you doing the job? Go do something you're obsessed with mastering.
I love it. Another absolute nugget of wisdom there to take away. Snehal, before we finish up, is there anything I've left on the table that you really wish I'd asked you just to get out there? You're like, Francis, why haven't you pulled on this thread just yet?
I would end with, there's a fundamental shift in cyber that had been going on, but in pockets. And I think AI and Mythos and so on are going to accelerate these two fundamental shifts. We need to stop saying we're compliant, because that's a point in time state, and start talking about how we are resilient to attack. Because the attackers are coming. They're going to gain initial access. Are you resilient? Can you recover? We have to stop saying that we're secure, which is a point in time state, and start talking about how we're defensible. If the attacker comes in, how rapidly can we adapt to prevent them from achieving their objectives? So I think in general, the vernacular in cybersecurity needs to shift from a point-in-time state mindset, I'm compliant, I'm secure, to a continuous mindset of I'm resilient and I'm defensible. And how do you institutionalize that culturally and through process and through talent and through conviction all throughout the organization?
It's a great note to finish on. Snehal, thanks a million for coming on and talking to me today. I got a lot from the conversation. I'm sure the listeners will really enjoy this one, and have a great day.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.